Welcome to episode 7 of Superhero Parables, Wolverine. Now, as you may or may not have noticed, I am not Pastor Barnes. I'm not Pastor Eric. I'm John. My name is Jon Cook. I'm a member of First Baptist. I am in the praise band there, and I do a little bit of teaching. I run a small group. Eric and I were having a conversation the other day, and he said, you should do one of the superhero parables. You've got some history with comic books and so forth, and it's true. I picked them up early on in junior high, collected for a while. I'm not as into them anymore so much, but a lot of the old heroes that were big when I was a kid are on the big screen now, and it's kind of fantastic to see them all brought to life. I know I used to cast those movies in my head when I was a kid all the time, but the one I decided to do, the superhero I decided to do, was Wolverine. Now he is. As you've heard Eric talk about already, he's not a perfect individual. Can we look at his life and do exactly what he does and take something away from that exactly? No, not really. He's a flawed individual. He's an anti-hero, but he is. I believe we can bring a lot from his life and from his behaviors and the things that he does. When I was reading comics in junior high, he was one of the heroes that resonated with me, and I'm not certain why that was exactly, but I think I just liked his tenacity and the fact that you could never count him out. The idea that he was always going to be right there in the middle of the fight, and he was oftentimes an underdog, but you could never count him out. You always knew that he was going to persevere. He was going to endure. Wolverine is his backstory. He was born in the 1880s in the wilderness in Canada. He was James Howlett, born to farmers, parents that were not really from anywhere significant. He was in the wilderness, and he grew up kind of weak and sickly. He was not the person that you see when you first encounter him in the comics. He was always kind of sick, and he grew up he was the adopted son of the Howletts. He is a mutant, which means his powers come from this mutation in his DNA. And a lot of times with the mutants, they don't have the powers right away. They kick in at a certain point. Some kind of catalyst, some sort of event brings them out. And with James Howlett, with young James Howlett, it was the witnessing of watching someone kill his actual father. His father was killed in front of him. This triggered a rage response that brought forth his mutant abilities. He in fact struck back at his father's killer, which was also what made him end up taking the path that he did. You find out his abilities were he has this sort of accelerated immune system, which is kind of the irony of his upbringing. He was kind of sickly, but this mutant immune system kicked in, and so his wounds healed super quickly. He was impervious and unaffected by poisons and toxins and things of that nature. He also had in his physiology 3 claws, retractable claws on each arm. I grew up thinking that they were actually metal and that they were given to him, but you find out much later, here's a spoiler, that the claws were actually bone, and he had those the whole time. He also has heightened senses. He has the ability to smell and see and hear far better than your typical human. And it is those things that give him the ability to survive kind of on his own. As he leaves from this upbringing and he ends up on his own in the wilderness, he just survives basically. He ends up moving from place to place. He's kind of a loner, and ultimately James Howlett takes the name of his actual father, which was Logan, was his last name. So he ended up getting this name. He goes by Logan, and further on you hear him take the name of the Wolverine, which he got while he was a cage fighter. They gave him that name because of his ferocity and tenacity and his scrappiness and ability to stay in the fight, which, they just named it after the best animal they could think of that embodied those qualities. Here we have the Wolverine. He sort of drifts along and is sort of a victim of circumstances, but ends up working with some covert organizations, and he ends up in a project called Weapon X, which is where he's given his skeleton is infused with an alloy that's stronger than anything else on Earth, and he increases his ability to fight. He's stronger, he's more durable, and all of these things. And by the time you see him fight, his first fight was with the Hulk, a vastly larger, stronger opponent. And he fights the Hulk, and it's one of the epic battles of comic book history, and one of my favorites. This is where we kind of first encounter the Wolverine, and so you see him take on this vastly larger foe, and he's kind of the underdog, and you're not sure how he's going to pull it off. Which, if you aren't picking up on that, what this kind of reminds me of, and it did then and it does now, but it's definitely a David and Goliath sort of moment. It really echoes that scene in Samuel when David goes out to face Goliath on his own in front of the armies. The thing about it is that I think there's some parallels there that we can draw, and I think if we talk about David and Goliath for a second, Goliath was this enormous hulk of a man, if you will, who was walking out proud in front of the Israelite army, or the army of Israel. He was out there making fun of God, making fun of the army, calling out challenges and deriding them for their cowardice and so forth. What we have in that situation is David showing up. He's not really even intending to go out there to fight, but he shows up and he hears the things that Goliath is saying, and he is overcome with this desire to fight, this anger against Goliath for the things he's saying about God. And David decides that he will be the one to take on Goliath. He will be the one to fight as the champion for the army of Israel. And he does this without armor. He does this with the tools that he has. Those being his skill with a sling and a stone that he's picked up as a shepherd. But more importantly than that, he does this with the certainty of the fact that God is backing him. He does it with the certainty that God's power is greater than Goliath's power. And he does it knowing that whatever the outcome of the battle, God is more. God is greater. God is more powerful than any Goliath, any soldier, any army that could come before him. And so David has a confidence in the power that he has come to rely on. And he faces Goliath and he wins, not with a sword, not with superior training, but with the belief and understanding that God is who he says he is, and that there is a power in Israel greater than Goliath or his army. And as characteristic with God, he does it with the small things. He takes out this big thing with the small things. We can bring that to Wolverine, I believe, because Wolverine is the same way. He faces often a larger foe. He's clearly outmatched. He's apparently unable to win in any way, right? But Wolverine has something similar to what David has, and that is something that no one else can see, something that Wolverine knows is there, and both, like David, Wolverine has come to trust. It is a fearlessness that David has and that Wolverine has, I believe. And it is born out of the knowledge and belief and understanding that you have something to rely on. Wolverine has three things, I believe, that make him fearless. Three things he knows he can rely on. And one of those is endurance, invulnerability. See, Wolverine has this increased immune system. He has this robust musculature. He may be small, but he can run longer than you can. He can fight longer than you can. He can stay up longer than you can. And he knows that he has that ability. He knows he has the endurance. He knows he has invulnerability. He knows that he has power. He knows that his weapons are true. He knows that his claws are sharper than your sword, or that you can't break them. He knows that his power, his weapon, is true. He knows that his weapon is incomparable to others. It's better. But he also knows that he has a healing power and a regenerative power. Even if you do manage to take a piece out of Wolverine, even if you do manage to knock him down, he has a healing factor, something inside that keeps him standing when no one else would be standing. And he's come to rely on those abilities. He's come to bring those things to bear with trust and with a certainty and with a ferocity and a fearlessness that is overwhelming even to a larger foe. I think those things are textbook biblical things that we can look at. For example, I want to read Isaiah chapter 40, verse 29 through 31. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This is a promise in Isaiah. This is a promise that we have. This is what God is going to grant. This is a promise to his people. The Old Testament is filled with promises like that. It is filled with promises of power and endurance. And it is God promising his people, I'm not going to leave you if you will stay with me. Stay with me and I will carry you wherever you need to go. And this is a promise that is echoed throughout Scripture, Old Testament and New. Let me bring up another verse here. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. He gives us the power we need to exist in this world, but not just to exist, but to thrive. The world is a hard place sometimes. The foes are big sometimes, and they're bigger than us. They're greater than us, but they're not greater than God. And his promises are very clear. We trust in him. We rely on him. His promises are that we can endure. It is not that every step will be perfect or every step will be easy, but that a reliance on God and his promises, a reliance on his power and the abilities that he gives us. Those things we can count on, and if we follow him, if we keep our eyes on him, that is where I think that this parallel can be drawn. Wolverine is a flawed person, as I said. He is a lot like we are. I mean, I've had my moments where I did not like myself, and I know that we all have those days where we're flawed and we're awful, and we're mean to ourselves, we're mean to each other, just these kinds of things in today's world. But we do have a renewing spirit that is given to us if we rely on God, if we follow God. And I think in Wolverine's case, he's kind of a loner. He's someone who's kind of doing whatever he wants on his own. And then one day he's recruited by Professor X to be a part of the X-Men, to be a part of this team. And Logan, Wolverine, finds himself presented with a cause and an ideal that he can believe in, that he can get behind, and something that he can protect and defend, and people that he can protect and defend. And it gives him purpose. It gives him a direction for the first time in a long time. And I think that that's true as well. I think if we find ourselves directionless and alone, that a reliance on God and a focus on his purposes and his ways and his promises can bring us to a place where we have a purpose again, where we have a direction we can go, and we can use those abilities and that power that God has promised us. And I think that really is the picture that Wolverine can give us. The idea that we're not too far gone, that we have a strength that is beyond normal abilities. It's just something we can count on, something we can rely on, and it comes from God. And if we will do that, then we can then in turn start to affect the world for God in ways that we couldn't do otherwise. We can defeat foes that we could not otherwise face. We can keep going when we could otherwise not. And we can stay in the fight longer. And I believe that is the key. That's what we can learn. And I hope that this is something helpful to you. And I hope that you can spend some time and kind of reflect on your own personal experience, your own personal life. Get with God and figure out, what does it look like if I turn and face God? What does it look like if I do what he says I should do? And if I put all of my conflict and all of my worry and all of that on him and focus on the tools and promises he's given me. Something strong, something reliable, something that is far more ancient and powerful than myself, than any of us could imagine. So think on it, and it's been great talking to you. I hope that we will see you all again soon. I can't wait to get back in church and see all of you on Sunday. And until next time, I don't know if I'm doing another one of these or not, but until next time, thank you so much. God bless you, and be careful and be safe. We will talk to you soon.